Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Almost 50 European leaders have arrived in the Albanian capital for talks focused on security, defense, and other pressing geopolitical matters. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is on the invite list, with the conversation on Friday expected to center on rallying support for the war-torn country. Let's cross now live to our correspondent, Angela Skujins, who is in Tirana. Angela, good morning. Now, how do we expect today's European Political Community Summit to pan out?
Yes, so reporting live from Tirana, where we're expecting in the next 5 minutes or so that Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, which secured an unprecedented fourth-term win at those recent elections this week, to walk down the red carpet behind me. As you can see, we've got some traditional dancing by Albanian folk dancers behind me, as well as a colourful display of culture as well as pride. But there's also significance as to why Albania is hosting this sixth EPC since they first started in 2022, which really back then was centred around securing support for Ukraine as it weathers another year of Russian invasion. That still sits at the core of these talks today, but it's backdropped by those key Eastern European elections that have taken place, with those Romanian elections also expected to finalise over the next coming days, as well as, of course, that Polish presidential election expected to kick off tomorrow. This really underscores the talks today, where also we know that the Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić will make an appearance, expected to cop some flack for his attendance at that controversial Moscow the 9th military parade. This really sits at the core of these conversations. We know that on the sidelines of these formal gatherings, we expect some kind of support to be hammered out for further sanctions or tariffs to be slapped on Russia for that country's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. But we'll be coming back to you live when those leaders make their appearance down the red carpet, which will include Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, of course. But that's all from me. I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
Thank you so much, Angela Skujins, coming to us live from Tirana. At the European Union Military Committee meeting in Brussels on Thursday, General Wiesław Kukuła, Chief of the General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces, discussed NATO's response to recent incidents in the Baltic, where a Russian fighter jet violated Estonia's airspace. The incident occurred when the Estonian Navy was escorting the tanker Jaguar, part of Russia's Shadow Fleet. Kukuła emphasized that the alliance's actions will become more robust, with more forces involved in more decisive measures in place to respond swiftly to potential threats.
We discussed not just tactical matters, but also the future of Baltic operations and how we intend to respond moving forward. I can say with certainty that NATO's reaction to incidents like these will become more robust. We will engage greater forces and act more decisively. This means we'll demonstrate our readiness to respond more swiftly, for example, toward vessels or aircraft that refuse inspection or raise our suspicions. Will intercepts happen faster? Not necessarily, but our posture will clearly signal readiness.
There is here an element of escalation, said Andrew Tettenborn, law professor from Swansea University, while speaking to TVP World about that recent incident in the Baltic Sea, where a Russian jet seemingly tried to escort a sanction-busting tanker from the so-called Shadow Fleet. Let's listen in.
There is here an element of escalation, though I'm not sure whether we should exaggerate its importance. Russia fairly regularly makes small incursions into NATO airspace, essentially to see what's going to happen. And what's happened here is that it's done exactly that, though with the extra excuse that the vessel is undoubtedly running light, coming in to pick up some Russian oil.
Years of diplomatic silence. Direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are set to begin on Friday in Istanbul. This does mark a significant development, as the two countries have not met face-to-face since March 2022. Turkey's foreign ministry has confirmed that trilateral negotiations will take place on Friday between Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia, as well as between the United States, Ukraine, and Turkey. However, a four-party meeting involving the U.S., Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey is not guaranteed. And while Vladimir Putin will not be attending, The Russian delegation, led by Vladimir Medinsky, is ready to begin the discussions. On the Ukrainian side, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy confirmed that his delegation, headed by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, will attend the talks, though he will not personally participate. Both sides have expressed willingness to negotiate, but with differing conditions. Ukraine calls for an immediate unconditional ceasefire, while Russia insists that specific terms must first be agreed upon. The last direct negotiations between the two sides took place in Istanbul back in March 2022, when the peace talks failed to halt the conflict. In an interview for World News Tonight here on TVP World, Martin Sklenar, Slovakia's former defense minister, shared his perspective on Vladimir Putin's decision to skip the ceasefire talks in Istanbul. Let's listen in.
Well, he could be afraid of actually talking to Zelenskyy and looking like the one who doesn't want to end the war, which he does anyway. So I guess that has a big say in his decision whether or not he will be coming to Turkey. But also from this decision of Putin, it is very obvious that the only partner that he wants to talk to is Donald Trump. But if you talk. If you want to solve a situation between Ukraine and Russia, those are the countries who should be involved. I mean, Donald Trump can only do as much as facilitating these kind of discussions, but obviously Putin wants something else rather than Ukraine.
Residents of Kyiv woke up to a series of explosions as Russian drones targeted the city. According to local authorities, the attack resulted in a fire breaking out in the non-residential Sviatoshinsky district. No casualties have been reported in the Ukrainian capital thus far.
The Ukrainian Air Force said the drones approached the city from the south and were tracked and engaged by Ukrainian air defense systems in the region. Responding to the attack, officials urged residents not to film or photograph the air defense efforts and remain in shelters until the all-clear signal is given. According to Mayor Vitaly Klitschko's post on Telegram, the drones reached Kyiv at 6:38 a.m. local time. The strikes came amid reports of a ballistic missile threat and ahead of the upcoming peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia.
Ukraine lost an F-16 fighter jet while repelling a Russian attack overnight, the country's Air Force wrote on Telegram. According to preliminary data, the pilot destroyed 3 air targets and was preparing to destroy a 4th when an extraordinary situation occurred on board. The pilot proceeded to fly away from a populated area and ejected from the aircraft. He was quickly found in good condition and evacuated from the area. The Air Force indicated that the crash did not appear to be caused by Russian fire, and a commission had been appointed to investigate the circumstances surrounding the incident. This is the 3rd F-16 that Ukraine has lost in combat as Russia continues its attack on the country. The first F-16s arrived in Ukraine on July 31, 2024. Kyiv has not disclosed the number of aircraft it has received. A coalition made up of Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Belgium pledged to donate some 60 planes. The defense ministers of the E5 countries, including Poland, Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy, are set to meet in Rome on Friday to discuss further support for Ukraine and preparations for the upcoming NATO summit in June. Poland will be represented by its defense minister, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz.
The talks between the defense ministers of the 4 key EU countries and Great Britain will focus on key strategic issues, current security challenges, and prospects for strengthening European defense, the Italian Defense Ministry said in a statement. It went on to add that coordinated support for Ukraine at a key moment for stability on the continent will also be among the main topics. The meeting will be held at the headquarters of the Italian Air Force, Palazzo dell'Aeronautica. The E5 is an informal format of cooperation established in response to current geopolitical challenges. Previous meetings of the defense ministers in the E5 format were held in March this year in Paris, in January this year in Warsaw, and in Berlin in November 2024.
Lithuania will seek to advocate for a stronger, better prepared, and more lethal NATO, said the Foreign Minister of Lithuania, Kęstutis Budrys, ahead of the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague. According to Lithuania's chief diplomat, the country's priorities during the summit in the Netherlands will include increased defense spending, more pressure on Russia, and continued support for Ukraine. Lithuania plans to increase its military spending up to 6% of GDP between 2026 and 2030. According to Budrys, NATO countries must achieve the mark before 2032 because of Russia's rapid pace of regenerating its forces. The Lithuanian official added that while the plan requires both political will and financial commitment, it remains achievable, at least from Lithuania's perspective. A new report from the International Institute for Strategic Studies estimates that replacing U.S. military support in Europe would cost a staggering $1 trillion over the next 25 years. Now, the report, released on Thursday, outlines that while Europe could manage without direct U.S. military support, doing so would require significant investment in defense capabilities. The cost of replacing U.S. equipment and personnel, including the purchase of 400 tactical aircraft, 20 destroyers, and 24 long-range surface-to-air missile systems, would amount to up to $1 trillion. Additionally, maintaining personnel, logistics, and operations would further add to the expenses, with personnel replacement alone estimated at over $12 billion. The report further indicates that despite efforts to promote EU-based procurement, local purchases are still limited in certain areas. However, recent trends show growing defense spending within Europe, with 52% of all defense contract value awarded to European suppliers. Romanian presidential candidate Nicu Șordan has reaffirmed he will continue to support Ukraine if he wins the elections. According to Dan, if Ukraine loses to Russia, Romania will have to increase military spending to prevent Moscow from attacking yet another country.
In the unfortunate event that, God forbid, Ukraine capitulates or becomes a kind of Belarus, Romania will have a much more aggressive neighbor, and then its military expenditures will increase considerably. I firmly believe that Romania, for its own security, must continue, together with its European and American partners, to support Ukraine so that Kyiv can obtain a peace that is as fair as possible.
13 people were injured when a car crashed into a crowd of fans outside the RCD Espanyol FC Barcelona derby match on Thursday. The incident occurred before the match, which saw Barcelona claim the La Liga title with a 2-0 victory. The game was briefly delayed while the referee received information from police. 4 of the injured were taken to the hospital, though authorities have reported none of them were seriously hurt. Police confirmed the crash did not pose a threat to fans inside the stadium. The driver of the vehicle was arrested on charges of dangerous driving and causing injury. Social media videos showed the car stopping between bins outside the stadium before driving into the crowd of Espanyol supporters who were gathered to welcome the team's coach. Local officials reported that the most serious injury was a broken leg, and 10 ambulances were dispatched to the scene. Catalonia's president, Salvador Illa, who was at the match, reassured the public, stating it was an accident and ruled out deliberate attack. And that's all for this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.